Welcome, everyone. I am Tom D'Alessio. I'm the director of the Center for Resilient Design here at the New Jersey Institute of Technology, and I'm thrilled that you're all here tonight. The Center for Resilient Design is proud to host this public reception of the Rebuild by Design program. Through applied research, field testing, and community outreach, NJIT's Center for Resilient Design can help residents, businesses, professionals, and officials rebuild smarter and better than the storm. We believe that tonight's unveiling will help residents and businesses recover and rebuild in a more resilient manner. And we look forward to engaging our students, faculty, staff, and alumni in these and other projects to improve the quality of life for all in New Jersey and the metropolitan area. This event is just one of a week's worth of observances of Hurricane Sandy. We encourage all faculty, staff, students, and alumni to take a look at the posters around campus, look at the website, and see if you can volunteer and participate in this week's observances. In particular, we're having a special Resilient Design Roundtable on Wednesday at 1:30 at Weston Hall. We're having the permanent ambassador to the Cape Verde Islands come and speak about climate change. If you know anything a bit about hurricanes, you know that the most severe hurricanes originate in the Cape Verde area. And we are thrilled that Ambassador Lima will be speaking at 1:30 at Weston Hall. His daughter is actually a student at NJIT. We're especially proud of that fact. And then on Friday, we're having an activity to start planning our alternative spring break 2014, where we are going to bring students and faculty together to help recover and rebuild after Sandy. For those of you that were part of the 2013 alternative spring break, we thank you and we encourage you to continue to participate. If you have any items you'd like to donate, non-perishable food, clothing, building equipment, or perhaps a monetary donation, there are boxes in the back and there are places throughout the week, and we'd encourage you to make those donations. At this point, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dean Urs Goschott, the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design.
Secretary Donovan, President Bloom, colleagues, members of the 10 teams, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a pleasure to have this event here. I would like to just recall to you what HUD is known for. HUD is known for fixing things and fixing things slowly. HUD is known for being able to put the pieces together again when Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. And I can understand the enormous pressure that the Secretary is under and HUD is under to yield to the political pressures, to pressures by people who are affected by the storm, to yield to pressures of our public opinion, and to, in the light of this context, have the courage to engage in this project of having a competition, an international competition, rebuilt by design is absolutely astounding to me. And I have enormous respect for the fact that you were willing to do that. And at a time like this, it really is absolutely imperative to have an act of courage of this size, an act of optimism that says, yes, we'll fix it this time, but this should not be a repeat conversation. How do we fix it? How do we put it back together again? And to have, at the same time, as you're fixing things in retrospective, to have a prospective view of how we can change the conversation in the future. I looked at some of the boards, and it was just dazzling, the array of ideas. The mere fact that this competition is not looking for multiple solutions to one problem, but just saying, what ideas do you have? Are there any ideas worth thinking about? And I know that regardless of what happens and how much of this will be implemented, it started a worldwide conversation, the end of which is many, many years from now. So this is a thrilling beginning. I would like to thank President Bloom. I know that when I came to him with the idea of having a Center for Resilient Design, I think it was a week after the storm, he said, of course. And we have been very fortunate to have one of our colleagues, Georgine Theodore, be the leader of one of those teams. So it's thrilling to be involved in all these aspects. So it now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the president of the New Jersey Institute of Technology, Joel Bloom.
Good evening. This is very, very impressive. And to the team leaders, kudos, and to all the students and staff and faculty who have done the work here. I think there's exceptional thinking, a lot of creativity, the understanding of the problem, and hopefully some solutions. I come from this from the perspective of living along the New Jersey shore. I didn't know what the shore was growing up in New York and working in California for many years. And you come to New Jersey and people talk about going to the shore. I subsequently learned, and it is a splendid area to live in. So as a result of Sandy, I've had an opportunity to rebuild my home as well. It's been a wonderful experience. Seriously, it has. I think we were here a couple months ago, and the SBA was here along with Secretary Donovan. And kudos to, obviously, the Secretary and HUD, and kudos to the SBA and all the mayors in the towns who help people such as myself to see if we could build a new house in, I think it took me about 9 months. But my hope for this evening, and many more evenings to come, is some of what I've seen here on the board won't have some of us reliving the kinds of episodes of the Sandy storm. So it is indeed encouraging to have a conversation tonight about innovation and resilience here in New Jersey. It is a sad memory, a very sad memory, to recall the events of a year ago when Hurricane Sandy not only took lives and property, but caused disruptions in basic functions of our state and its people. We have learned many lessons from this event, one of which is that it takes an interdisciplinary approach to anticipate, plan, and prepare for such future natural and at times man-made disasters. We do need to know more about the effects of global warming, rising seas, resilient design, new building materials, nanotechnology, and smart systems. Here at NJIT, which has just been an absolutely wonderful place to spend my 22 years, we have interdisciplinary solutions to these complex problems. It's very high on the agenda of our faculty and our students. We do research in these areas. For those of you who don't know, Big Bear Solar Observatory is a property of NJIT, where we are looking with the largest telescope in the world, where we are looking at the effect of solar disruption here on Earth. We are studying as well, we have faculty in civil engineering, studying the impact of Sandy on the shoreline. Others are researching and applying new building materials with embedded smart technology. And of course, our Center for Resilient Design, initiated by Urs Garshat, Dean Garshat, and Tom D'Alessio and their colleagues. And of course, our students, well over 300 of them participated in Sandy storm and the alternative spring recovery. And I'm glad to hear, as I just did from Tom, that we'll be at it again. So thank you for that. So at NJIT, we welcome the conversation and this outstanding work and the actions necessary to achieve resiliency. Allow me at this time to introduce the Honorable Secretary Shaun Donovan. Secretary Donovan is chair of President Obama's Hurricane Sandy Rebuild Task Force. The task force is working on a comprehensive plan, and I think that's what's significant, a comprehensive regional plan to guide the long-term recovery of this area, this region, and our coastline. However, I learned in researching the Secretary, among other things, we grew up in similar boroughs, if you can't tell from my accent of New York and Brooklyn. His impressive leadership and his long-term commitment to building strong, sustainable, inclusive neighborhoods that are connected to education and jobs. And I think that's what's critical, connecting neighborhoods to education and jobs for access and opportunity to all Americans. Mr. Secretary, in our Renaissance city here in Newark, and I know many of you are visitors, and you may not be familiar with Newark, but as we speak, there are over 1,000 new housing units coming online, along with over 1 million square feet of office space and about 300,000 square feet of new retail space. And NJIT, as a result of some of the folks in this room, is in the midst of all of these efforts. For NJIT, and as you may be aware, there are over 55,000 college student, staff, and faculty in this town across 4 of our universities. We applaud your leadership in this effort as well. So please, Honorable Shaun Donovan, come forward.
First of all, let me thank you, President Bloom, for hosting us here tonight and the wonderful partnership that we've had in this entire process. Tom D'Alessio, Dean Gausha, thank you so much for your leadership as well in all of this work. I need to thank Eric Kleinenberg and his entire staff at the New York Institute for Public Knowledge. They have led this entire process of the competition. I want to thank the Rockefeller Foundation and many other philanthropic partners who have funded all of the work that you see surrounding us tonight and this entire competition process. I want to say a special thank you to Henk Ovink, who has, from our side in the federal government, led this process. And I want to tell you a short story about how this all got started. Last New Year's, I had planned a family vacation to Berlin. And my youngest son, his closest friend, was spending a year abroad in Berlin. And they were very, very excited about the trip, my 2 young sons. And then Sandy happened. And needless to say, a 14-year-old and 11-year-old boy, when I told them we were going to take part of our family vacation and go tour flood protection measures in the Netherlands, saying they weren't particularly excited about that is maybe an understatement. And I had the great good fortune to be able to spend 2 days with Henk, who at the time was the Director General of Spatial Planning and Water Affairs. I just love saying that title. It's kind of amazing, tells you what, how important this work is in the Netherlands to have even someone with that title. And in the 2 days that we spent together, we hatched the idea for this competition. And much to my surprise and delight, when I landed back from the Netherlands here in the States, I had an email from Henk saying, I hope this isn't too forward, but I'd like to come work with you to create this competition and to help in the work rebuilding from Sandy. And so here he is today leading this competition. And I just want to say thank you, Henk, for taking that leap of faith. No, it wasn't too forward. I also want to say a special thank you to the 10 teams that you see represented. These 10 represent, I think it's probably fair to say, hundreds of people now across the world that have worked to bring you what surrounds you here tonight. And let's all recognize, as we mark the first anniversary of Sandy tomorrow, that this storm brought us profound tragedy. I'm a New Yorker, as you've heard. I have friends who lost loved ones, who lost their homes, their businesses, and nothing will ever undo that enormous pain and damage. But if we don't learn from these type of crises, if we don't ensure that, in the words of Rahm Emanuel at the beginning of this administration, that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste, then shame on us. And really what brings us together tonight is to take steps to ensure that a crisis like this, while it will happen again in certain senses, that it can never happen in the same way, with the same deep tragedy and loss that this region has experienced. We have talked for many years, I think, in this region about the risks that we all face. It's time that we do something about them. And tonight is a part of doing something about those risks. What we're celebrating tonight is the culmination of the second stage in our competition. It began with a worldwide call for interdisciplinary teams to come together and propose new innovative solutions for our region. I remember the morning that the proposals were due, Hank was quite nervous. We had 2 proposals from around the world. They had come actually from pretty close. They weren't very good, as I remember. And Hank had told me that if we got 50 proposals, that would be a great success. If we got 75, it would be probably unprecedented. By the time that the competition closed that evening, we had 148 proposals with teams that represented more than 15 countries across the world. And what you see here tonight is the work of 10 teams that were able to rise from that group of 148 and make it into the second phase of the competition. What you see is remarkable teams that bring the best experience in this work from around the world. But what excites me as much as the commitment and the expertise of the teams that are here is that this process has awoken, and I think tapped into, an excitement about this work within the communities that have been affected. We have Mayor Zimmer and other public officials that are with us tonight who have been such great champions of this kind of work. And it has begun a truly collaborative process between design and government and citizens. And that is really what we're trying to accomplish here tonight and with this entire competition. I should also add that it's not just me in the Obama administration. I've spent over an hour directly with the President of the United States talking about this competition. He is enormously excited about it. In fact, what he said is, this is the kind of work that I was elected to do. And you have, through the Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force, more than 24 federal agencies that are prepared to support the work that comes out of this competition. More than that, we actually have money to build this work. Too often, competitions lead to beautiful renderings or innovative designs that inspire other work, but don't actually get built. And I am absolutely committed to make sure that the $50 billion that Congress appropriated to help rebuild from Sandy goes to support the best of the work that comes out of this competition. Just today, I announced another $5 billion that's going to support New York and New Jersey in the rebuilding process and can help to support the work that we're talking about tonight. Finally, let me just say that this is work that we must do nationally. It cannot be just about this region. As the President said in his second inaugural address, one of the great challenges we face as a nation is how we can help to reverse and live with the effects of climate change. There are doubters out there, but when you look at the fact that 12 of the 12 warmest years in the history of our planet have happened in the last 15 years, when you look at the confluence of Sandy and all the devastating disasters we've seen in the last few years, there is no denying that we must live and build differently in this country. I am absolutely committed to that work, but more importantly, we are all committed in this process to that work. So I want to ask all of you, make tonight an opportunity that this is not just a design competition in a traditional way. Too often, innovative designs, ways of building differently, end up in magazines or books, but they don't end up touching our lives. If this is really going to be a competition that makes a difference in our communities, then all of you that are participating tonight have to take responsibility for the work as well. Ask questions, stay after the panel is done to interact, and participate in these designs as we go forward. Help them get built. Ask your public officials, leaders in your communities to stand up and ask questions about these issues, and to make sure that as we rebuild differently. We cannot accept the status quo that we've had, and tonight is one small part of making that change very real. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for participating in this very exciting process we're all engaged in, and I look forward to seeing what happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Donovan, dear Shaun, for your leadership and friendship. It's been a pleasure being in the US, I must say. Now, serious. Rebuild by design, and I'm going to make this short and sweet because I want to talk to you guys over there. Ask something, you know, when a storm hits, it asks something of the imaginary as well as the impossible. Well, you know, we have stories about that. But I don't have hair. So that didn't work. So we reached out to our philanthropic partners, and they helped us face this in your region, how to work on it. Now, why design? And I have to do this before I get to you, because all issues, social, economic, cultural, they all have a spatial impact. And they interact spatially. And because they have this impact and interact spatially, planning and design make a difference. It's a part of how we deal with things. Not only because generic questions have a specific impact on the ground, but also because design has the potential to look back in its analysis and to look forward in its perceived projections. And connecting that, looking back and looking forward, actually makes, and that's the hard thing of politics, and I know pretty well because in the Netherlands it's not very different than in the US. You want to be acting on a day-by-day basis. But if you want to be effective on this day-by-day basis, you have to have this broader base of looking back, looking forward. Collaborate with engineers and scientists, with businesses and designers. You have to have that base. And that's what design brings. But it also needs a different state of mind of all actors involved. There's no superhero. There's one in the room, but for the rest we don't. So we have a task force, so that's great. But then again, the task force is already different than any other governmental governance institution we had or seen before. So it was already an invention. So when Sandy hit New York, there was the New York region and the New Jersey region, there was a momentum. Now, it's a terrible thing to say that you have to exploit a momentum when so many people and lives got devastated. But I'm pretty sure there's no other way. when Sandy hit New Jersey, this same momentum happened on the political level. So we have to make sure that we do not waste this. Well, the secretary told. He went to the Netherlands. He picked me up in a tunnel somewhere in Amsterdam. You know, it's a hard thing to say, I know, but you know, there was someone there with a helmet to guard this process, so everything went safe. So now we have a problem. We know what's going on, but we don't know how to respond because all our policies and rules and regulations do not fit the issues we face. So we need projects and innovative solutions, but we also need this innovative process. So that's when we started talking about competitions. So Shaun said, well, we have price policy in the US. And that's very much focused on, this is my problem, I throw it in society, and they would come up with a solution. And we talked about this, and I said, well, we don't know what the problem is. We actually don't know. We can't boil it down to 1, 2, or 4, or 5 questions. We have to get the best minds. So we did. We created a detour. We didn't bring solutions into the rebuilding strategy out of Rebuild by Design, but we brought a process into the Hurricane Sandy rebuilding strategy. And that process was embraced thanks to the leadership of Shaun Donovan and his staff, guided by Laurel Blatchford and Marion McFadden and Scott Davis and all those others, to make sure that this process went forward. Now we're here, we're only not even halfway. So what you see, although fascinating and great, is only the beginning. Inventing a process, we got the best talent, and we got funding, and I'm not going to talk about it. So we're here, it's October 28th, tomorrow's anniversary of Sandy. I have to repeatedly tell my wife, she's not my girlfriend. As we live in DC, but I'm more in New York. Luckily she was there this morning, so she could actually witness anything that came up. So I'm going to talk to the teams now, because I want to know what they did. And I invite the secretary to join me on stage so he can actually help answer some of the questions. I walk, I can't sit. Okay, otherwise I can't look at you all. So we started, we got a call, we got 10 teams and the chair of the Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force guiding a process of innovation. Now, so it's my conviction, we have design policy, I work on design and politics for the last 10 years, did research, but why does it matter on the regional scale? So I started this morning with Kate, and I will now will not do that. So I'll begin with Bjarke and say, when you saw the RFQ on this, did you believe that it was true, or did it make sense?
I mean, I must say, like, yeah, you always look at these things with skepticism, and I think Mr. Secretary also addressed the issue that for once this was not just an ideas competition that started with the abstract, with the idea of putting forward ideas for inspiration, but it was actually going to be backed up with sort of a handsome sum of money to actually help realize some of these projects. And then when we started sort of looking into it, we also realized that part of like assembling these gigantic teams was also to actually spend this first phase on trying to identify who are the like local and regional stakeholders that we could actually sort of develop these opportunities with. So what we'll see if you go around and look at the different boards is that all of the different teams have actually sort of identified not only within them a group of consultants, but also in the different areas where they have interest, who are the stakeholders that could actually help contribute to realizing this project, both sort of public interest group, political groups, and businesses. So in that sense, I gradually realized that behind what looked like what could be like an academic exercise is actually like a very sort of holistic and pragmatic approach to something that I hope will happen.
So, and what does it mean for a designer like you?
I mean, I think for me, I think one of the strengths of design thinking and architectural thinking is that we are trained and we have the capacity to turn abstract ideas or abstract values into concrete visions. So we can actually access rather complex political or sort of climatological information and then turn it into like really concrete and specific action. And I think in that sense, a process like this will also help the various decision makers to actually identify really specific opportunities that can actually bring not only resilience but also growth and public benefits to the affected areas.
Okay, thank you. Cindy, you're from the team with a huge amount of people from university. So science is your driving force, science and research by design. Tell us what that adds, because we talked about politics and the people on the ground and in the region, and we talk about design and the difference that it makes. But your team actually shows a different take on this.
We do. First of all, I need to acknowledge how happy I am in everybody's opening comments tonight that the theme was change versus fix. That is fundamental. And we realized as a team, we realized this very early after reading the brief, that we needed folks on our team, which Penn has a tremendous depth of resource, and all of our consultants bring greater depth as well, ways of bringing about change. Okay. We realized this was not just a physical design problem, but it was a social and economic design problem as well. And we built our team with that awareness. We actually chose to work in some of the most vulnerable areas, places not just physically vulnerable, but economically and socially. This was kind of a defining characteristic of our team. Those particular communities really have the most to lose if there isn't a change in the way we do business, if there isn't a change in consciousness. And so we are thinking that government and the individual need to bend closer toward community, toward a community solution. That's
okay, and that's scientifically proven right now. Yeah. Almost. Yeah.
Almost.
Okay, Jamie, so you tap into this. I mean, if I look at what your team did from a different perspective, you're in a design competition. What are you doing here? Tell me.
We're wondering the same thing.
Good question. We're a team that's economic development, real estate professionals working with designers, architects, landscape architects. But I think that it's the change point that Cindy's making that really was what drove us too, because there was an appropriation. The secretary described it. There was a big announcement today. $50.5 billion for recovery and resiliency in the region, which is a tremendous amount of money. At the same time, it's not a tremendous amount of money. One example, New York City's plan for full surge protection of the city alone for New York City, and just surge protection, leaving aside other elements of climate change protection, was $60 billion. So what we need to do, and I think what a lot of the teams have focused on, is thinking about how to bring change about in an incremental way as other activities take place in this really dense, heavily built region that we live in. The focus that we took was in a way making the assumption that the very large-scale, long-term infrastructure problems would get figured out by some of our colleagues, and that there were vulnerable populations and vulnerable businesses, 100 million square feet of commercial businesses within the floodplain in our region, 175,000 workers employed, 20% of the region within those uses. And so we looked at that and we said, how can we begin to aggregate up those uses and figure out a way to make them more resilient? And what drove us was thinking about that commercial activity. How do I make a storefront, a building protected, but how do I also look at a vital corridor and create an edge protection around it? Or look to make a commercial corridor the source of vibrancy and recovery for a community as a whole. In a place like Asbury Park, where we talk about a shorefront town where you've got beachfront, but you've also got a commercial corridor that is local and serves the population, we looked at ways that we connect that and provide flood protection, but at the same time provide greater amount of economic activity and jobs.
David, thank you, Jamie. David, you focused on the almost on the smallest scale, I would say, the building. And so, as of the teams, and you will all see this, is that every team takes this different. That's why we choose you all. You're not only bright, but you're also different. So, how does that end to this building scale and the community attachment to the regional? So, where does they match?
Well, one of the things about our team that I think is important is that we all work on the Gulf Coast. So here we are, 8 years after Katrina, recognizing the determination of communities needs to have a bit of a structure in order to maintain some of that effort. And so one of the considerations, I guess, that our team has had is how do you, I think when you put on the slide this notion of motivation, right? Something happens and it brings about an awareness of risk and need to do things differently. How do you sustain that? How do you sustain that over long term? And so part of the thinking of establishing sort of places in the community that can work on these issues day to day begins to help us realize how we can sustain these efforts so that opportunity time period is not lost because we're able to have that work to continue.
Yeah, and because this is more than about design. This is about change, and if it's about change, it's not only about physical change, but also policy changes. And any innovative design will obstruct any policy by any government, actually. So there's also the other process that has to go happen. That's why it's a collaborative effort. But communication is key, and I have to ask this again, Daniel. And so this is a design team. So I don't want to frame them as communications specialists, but in their solutions, they actually took on not only saying we have to focus on the designing of part of the issues to build more resilient, but we also have to start talking about it in a different way. So we get not only better understanding out of science, but better understanding as people who live in this region have to deal with these issues. Talk us through this.
Absolutely. So the way our team kind of framed this endeavor was, if you look at the environment around us and you look at our individual capabilities, we kind of structured it into 4 broad brackets. You have landscape and the ecological environment that you can interact with and influence. You have the built environment and infrastructure, and you also have the political policy environments. The other thing that stood out to us was interaction. Just how do we engage with information? How do we engage with different people? And so with that frame in mind, we kind of proceeded along the last few months of research. One thing that has kind of cropped up during that time is that framing, that understanding of information, the process of interaction isn't consistent, and sometimes it's detrimental to our ability to affect change. So at the most basic level, one of our opportunities, one of our kind of challenges that we want to pursue is simply how do you better frame information? How do you better frame the conversation so that we can approach things on an equal basis? We can have a common understanding. And to bring back the comment that we spoke of earlier today, one thing that we looked at is a lot of the terminology around flood risk is very opaque. So how do you translate it from basic information such as the definition of a 100-year flood and translate that into something much more accessible, much more common, such as the probability of experiencing a 100-year flood during the course of your mortgage. It's something that's tangible. It's something that people can understand, and it relates to your everyday. So taking that frame in mind, we hope to do further.
So this is key. Kate, your perceived process is all about communication in a totally different way. You tap into local schools and the local culture, but build towards these regional and long-term resiliency projects. How does it work for you to actually be able to, as the non-diver on your team, I just learned this morning, to tap into this collaborative part and at the same time build this huge amount of regional structures that build regional resiliency more than the very, very local?
Right. We were really fascinated by the notion of the unit of landscape as a scale of change, and also as a scale that can immediately kind of be perceptible and stewarded by a community. So our project really aimed to bring together the scale of ecological infrastructure and localized ecological infrastructure with a kind of a stewardship, schools-driven kind of learning framework. And so we've been focusing on bringing in high schools and middle school students and expanding upon the kind of model of the Harbor School, which is a kind of science applied, applied science, marine applied techniques, and aquaculture school, and kind of exploding that into the region. So the idea is that you can begin to aggregate units of ecological infrastructure and begin to pair them up and expand them, but based on this notion of what is protective for your community, and not only kind of building up the idea of sort of an ecological resiliency framework that reduces risk or steps down risk, but also begin to integrate and really build from a concept of social resiliency that integrates knowledge and experience with the water into the process. So it's basically like a lived, learned experience of resiliency.
So now we get to connect the community with the water, because that's what we are talking about, which is a very Dutch thing almost. We talk about water all the time. Georgine, help me with water. What does it mean for you as a designer and part of your team?
Well, our project is called Grassroots Regionalism, and so one of the things that we were looking at were things or structures that are out there that actually connect different communities at a regional scale. And so in our project, we looked at water, for example, the water of a creek, or the water of a bay, or the water in a marsh, or the water of the beach, as an element that can be enjoyed locally, but also could be recognized at a larger scale. And so our projects, or our design opportunities, we're really looking at ways that we could build on those, say, regional water elements and use them as a way to unite people and then sort of spark change.
Jason, same question actually for you. You're sitting next to each other. It's got nothing to do with it. Jason is on a team, a Boston team, and the first time they presented, I got a little worried. I think you were also the first that presented, because we got these questions, and the people from the governor's office are in the room, and we're very happy. But they were asking us, will these teams focus on New Jersey? And I said yes, but Jason only focused on New Jersey, and we said, well, yeah, the research has to actually be on the whole region, not only New Jersey. So they took that very serious, but there was a reason why you focused on New Jersey. So I don't want to make fun of it, but you had this perspective, and I want to know. I know, but I want you to talk about it.
Well, the truth comes out about Hank's concerns early on. He did express that earlier, so it didn't just come out tonight. But for us, when the proposal came out, we looked at it and gave a lot of thought to where to focus, whether it would be urban areas or coastal communities, and ultimately decided to zero in on the New Jersey shore. We became known as the beach team, and you see on our board's the beach, but it's the shore, or the shore, depending upon which accent you want to use. And that was because as we started to look into it, we realized that we needed strong partners that understood what was on the ground. And we reached out to relationships that we had with folks at Rutgers, and Stephen Handel and his partners collectively brought together through the Institute for Coastal and Marine Sciences. And with that, we brought together a whole host of people from within the state that are ecologists and biologists and sociologists and engineers. And with that, went into this exploration of what the Jersey Shore was and delved into that to get an understanding of what that meant, that culture, and what that meant to the generations of people that have gone to the Jersey Shore, for people in New Jersey, but also people who come from New York or from Pennsylvania and visit there. And went into that to get an understanding of just what that meant, what it represented economically, what kind of impact that had, but how within this fragile system of the ecology, how we could actually start to look at ways to diversify that even greater and take some of these vulnerable areas right on the shore and start to bring it actually into the mainland and diversify and expand on that and bring that to a much broader audience to make that more resilient in the future.
Thank you. Now, Claire, you brought the shore to a new perspective. You actually, in your team, gives us, but it's going to take a while, but it gives us a new perspective on the shore. We can actually look at it from the Atlantic. So now, help us why we should actually tap into your very long-term process and what the meaning is of the shore and water in it.
In a lot of ways, I think like many of the teams, we actually started with problem seeking. And I tried to figure out what the problem was, and the best way to do that was to talk to a huge number of people. And in a sense, I would regard the idea that there is something bigger that we can calculate, that we can model, that we can share in, is actually coming out of this incredibly intimate local question that kept coming up in every place we went out to talk to people, which is, how are you going to protect me? Like, how are we going to be protected? And the answer to that actually turns out, and I think many of us found this, is that we all need to understand where we are. We all need to understand better what's going on. We need to understand what to do. We all need a plan. But in a sense, if there is technology out there, if there is the means to actually make choices about how to build something that actually is a better investment, then we all might pool our resources together and we might invest in something better. It's hard actually to make these decisions as individuals, but throughout we have many scientists, and especially on the team, and everyone kind of agreed that, in a sense, when we aggregate or pool things, we get better results.
Yeah. So that was very comforting this morning when we also had this drawing up, and people actually came up to me and said, you know what, Henk, I'm not in a circle. Do I have to worry? And when you started talking to them, they actually said, I'm actually in your process because all these teams come up with solutions that are applicable in my non-circle, but I have to work with you and the officials to implement this. So you also see there's no state distinction or boroughs or counties or cities. So you don't know where you are. Before you know it, you crossed from New York State to New Jersey or the other way around. And that's fascinating because regional interdependencies, of course, don't mind governance structures. Sandy could care less about, which mayor actually is where, but the impact all of a sudden does. So collaboration across borders on a regional scale. And that brings me to Christian, the last, and you noticed I have them all, because I want them all on the, and before I ask Secretary Donovan, Shaun, to give us a last comment. But Christian, you immediately got across the state. You're hopping from New Jersey to New York, to New York to New Jersey, and on and off. And you're from the Netherlands. Tell us, what happened?
Well, your plane lands in Newark, and then you take no, that's a bad reason. But I think the most important reason is that the water behaves in such a way. So when the water came in from actually all sides, not only from the sea, but also from the river, from below, from the top, then you acknowledge the fact that this is how we have to look at this region from all sides at the same time. And then we can also not then think in a one-trick pony kind of protection, like just blocking the water. No, we have to deal with the water as it is. And then when we try to understand the landscape, we actually, well, noticed through the Palisade, running through almost in between New Jersey and New York and the water, that the landscape defines ultimately these borders, but they are mutually independent. And what we try to do with the project is to understand this landscape with this interdependency and look if we can come up with a resilient idea how the water can actually be welcomed. And well, in that sense, well, you all have the same question at hand. So we hope that we brought new solutions for that.
Yeah. So the regional aspect, it's critical. As the Secretary said in the beginning, there's more to it than local solutions, although the connection with any community is vital for any solution. So collaboration on all scales, across sectors, is key. And if you're honest and Dutch blunt, in the sense as I sometimes can be, is that Governor Christie is responsible for most of the assets of New York City, because the interdependencies when it comes to sewage and transportation and energy all lie across the water in New Jersey. So collaboration in this region is key, and these interdependencies are there, and these teams discover this huge amount of big dilemmas. But I think what is key is that they also find a way out on the small scale. Because what we don't want and never perceived is the impossibility for them to move forward. We don't want you to tell us that governance is difficult. No, we want you to actually help to make governance more effective. Secretary Donovan, last word and question perhaps to the teams, to me or the public, of what you heard and saw until so far. You deep dived in some of the team's work. Help us in the last remarks.
You don't need any help, Hank. No. So 3 comments, I think. One is to this point about regionalism. And it's one of the things when I went to the Netherlands, or if you travel most places around the world, what you see is that we have a particular form of governance in the US that is a federalist system that, for many very good reasons, gives an enormous amount of authority and deference to local and state government. And yet, when you have climate and a whole range of things we've talked about tonight that don't respect those borders, we have a fundamental problem. And so it's not just that we need institutions that start to span those borders, as I think we've connected with in this competition, but we need ideas that span those borders too. And part of it is about creating solutions that have resonance and have implications for many places. And I think that's been a very important part of the way what you're hearing tonight in very different ways, but also that we had to create a process or try to create a process where there was sharing of information, both internationally with the US, but also among jurisdictions and places and people in the region. And I think that's was kind of fundamental to us. But second, and you may not know, but it's certainly part of why this process has been so near and dear to my heart. I am a lapsed architect, married to a landscape architect, and have always felt that there was the potential for design to bring new ideas and solutions to the work that we're doing. And so we have a system that is organized in the federal government. I do housing, I have a colleague who does transportation, I have another one who does infrastructure, and there's an enormous amount of work going on in the recovery around the region that is within those cylinders, those silos. And unless we actively work within government to create linkages and create ways to engage all those cylinders, we're going to end up with solutions that are really kind of 1 + 1 = 1. Not even 1 + 1 = 2. And I think what we're aiming for here is solutions that say 1 + 1 could actually equal 3. If we think about cohesive solutions that span very different ideas. And then the third thing to me that's, having just lived through, I don't know how many of you know the HUD building. It's one of the great brutalist works of architecture in the history of our country. It can be a little lonely when it's full. When 96% of your employees are on furlough, it's a particularly lonely place. And so I've had some time to think about, you know, what we went through and the politics that led us into a place where we were, you know, furloughing most of our country's federal workers to a place where we almost defaulted on our full faith and credit. But part of the problem is that we live in a world where ideas too often come out of orthodoxy, of, you know, our political orthodoxy or the place that we live. And one of the great potentials of design, and I think of this work, is to lift us out of our expectations and to really use the process of design, of nonlinear thinking, of innovation, to surprise us. And so one of the things I've loved about this process, and also one of the things I'm really interested to see what happens. I have no idea where this is going. I think Henk didn't know where it was going at the beginning. And that's part of what's exciting about it, is to be involved in a process that can genuinely surprise you at a time and in a world where so much of what we hear and so many of the things that we believe are so predictable. And so I'm really excited, and I hope you will all be to help. You are part of creating this. This is not 10 designers making a process. This is all of us designing together. And if you don't actively engage in it and help us, I'm going to be a lot less surprised and excited. I think all of us are, but also we're not going to end up with the right ideas that can actually make a difference in your communities.
Thank you so much. So, right, I'm going to finish. You have to talk to these guys around the room. I want to thank you all for being right on the spot, but also patient. 10 teams is a lot to wait your turn. When you're first, you have to wait long. Thank you very much, Shaun, for wrapping it up, because you, again, put it right for us and on the spot. And this is, just to follow up on your last remarks, go to the website, rebuildbydesign.org. You will find all the opportunities the teams actually come forward with. There are 41 of them for the whole region. Give us your comments tonight when you get home, tomorrow morning before breakfast, at lunch. If you do it before Wednesday noon, we'll use it in our evaluation. If you do it after Wednesday noon, it's not wasted. Go there still, because these teams will be working on this region and these opportunities also with your comments. So this connection through the website is one. There's these little markers, and I always forget the name, on the boards as well. You can scan them with your iPhone and it will lead you to the opportunities on the website. But you will not be able to do that at home. So remember rebuildbydesign.org. We will select in the next phase for every team one project to go forward, but we will not waste the projects that weren't selected. So it will never be a waste of your time, and it's very much needed for building a more resilient region. I thank you all for coming here. I thank the teams and the 200 people behind them. They're actually working on this region. And the secretary, the president, Mayor Zimmer, Tom. Enjoy the plants.